Hello, everybody. It's January 16th, 2026 on a Friday. You remember, well, at least I remember when I was a young girl, how we look forward to Fridays. We always look forward to the weekends because for us, growing up, either it was the weekend after leaving school or the weekend because I worked in a banking position back in the day. So we only worked like Monday through Friday. Remember that? God, what horrible scheduling that was. But anyway, we look forward to Fridays because Fridays usually meant either we go to the movies, we order pizza, Sometimes we would go to these events that were happening, dance events where we would socialize, blah, 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 blah. But, fast forward, here we are, 2026, and things have changed, and that's what we ought to expect as we go into the age of Aquarius, February 3rd, 2029. It's just going to be these changes that will be happening, whereas they will be so subtle that you don't even recognize how things are changing. As a matter of fact, last night when I was out and about and it was beautiful, nice and cool, and I can remember looking out, say for example, you're in a fish bowl, and I can remember looking out in this fish bowl and seeing a level of activity, let's just say towards the bottom of the fishbowl, and then and then above it all was just empty space. Nothing was really going on. But last night when I did the same thing that I normally do, I recognized there have been 2, 3, 4 rings of development, meaning in that short period of time, in the last 2 years I've been here, there has been extensive growth in this area. And I know a lot of people see growth as progress. And I just hate to be the bearer of bad news, because due to the fragile infrastructures and the climate destructions that we face, all we're doing is setting ourselves up for more and more catastrophes. Because why? Because we'll have all of these other structures that will be in the mix. For example, you're in the area where they have earthquakes. Of course, the less you have, the less people and buildings you have, the safer you are. But imagine having, structures upon structures of buildings and properties and blah, blah, blah. Though it just adds to the destruction to be expected. Okay. Any of us who are not delusional and hallucinating know that we are in a climate destruction. We're not in a climate, what do they call it? A climate change. I mean, what is that? These things that they say that to minimize the dangers we face. Not to mention, a lot of people are moving into, I'm telling you, the mountains are disappearing. Okay, why are the mountains disappearing? Because we're going up there, taking that resource to build. We use the mountain resource to build foundations, to build structures. And so it's just leaving a lot of regions, a lot of areas vulnerable. Because what's going to happen is those mountains that were there to protect will now be missing. And so it's just going to allow for a lot of free fall. Look at that. Look at every time. Oh my gosh. You have to be really careful with people backing up because they don't look. He just backs up and, But so what happens is All right, let me see if I can get in this space without it causing some issues here. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da. All right, good. I'm safely in a spot. Oh, Lord. So the mountains are disappearing because we are going up into the mountains and taking away the resources of the mountains, using it to build structures. Okay, those mountains were there for a reason. Mountains are there to protect the surrounding property. So if you remove portions of the mountains just to build other structures, whether they're housing or commercial, what are you doing? You're leaving yourself vulnerable. The same thing with earthquakes. The more people that are saturated in an earthquake zone or the plates or whatever, the more devastation of the materialism. Okay? So, yes, I know people want to, put their head in the sand and say, look, we're developing, we're building housing with, and we're not considering what the actual issues are. And the actual issues are overpopulation. It's overpopulation of people, animals, equipment, toys, materialism, footprints. Okay, so yes, it sounds logical to build housing after housing after housing to take care of the housing, but all it does is causes more destruction to the planet. Okay, so I'll talk about this more later. I've talked about it so many times before, whereas most people are just not paying attention to that. We're just attempting to sweep certain things under the rug. And again, Fridays are not Fridays anymore. Even though I do everything in my power to treat every day as Friday, Saturday, Sunday being the best. It's hard to do that when you have a lot of people everywhere, a lot of noise, a lot of traffic, a lot of interference with sounds and tones, whereas people cannot get a good night's rest. It's hard to breathe because of the dust particles in the air. Whether you see them or not, we're breathing in foul, F-O-U-L, air. It's not healthy air that we're breathing. So just, again, the damage has been done. No one's listening to anyone. But you individually can live a beautiful, prosperous life if you just consider what's going on around you. Always pay attention to your environment. When I move again, which I will, like I said, this area was temporary for me. I am going to consider, how I can be less destructive any more than what's happening now to the planet, and consider biodiversity, the fauna and the flora. We all have to share this planet together. It doesn't belong to the billionaires. It doesn't belong to any one individual or groups. It belongs to everybody. Animals, insects, creatures. So there's a lot that's coming down the pike. As I said, I'm just amazed at how much we've developed. And when I say develop, building and building, and the mountains are disappearing because of that. So I'm going to stop right now. I'm getting ready to run inside and, handle my business. But I just wanted to share that on this Friday, January the 16th, 2026. Development doesn't mean what it used to mean. Development is actually is similar to destruction, especially on this planet. Peace and love. Talk to you soon.